At my father-in-law's retirement party in Miami, a hotel waitress slipped a folded napkin under my plate. Just 7 words, and my entire marriage collapsed. While the band played and champagne glasses clinked, I sat there smiling, pretending I didn't feel my life burning in my hands. What was written on that napkin would not only expose my husband's biggest secret, it would unleash a chain of events that no one in his family could stop. The camera glides through the golden glow of the hotel ballroom, past champagne flutes and polished silverware, before settling on Madison Clark. She sits at the long banquet table, posture effortlessly graceful, a sleeveless charcoal dress tracing her frame. Soft waves of chestnut hair fall neatly over one shoulder, catching the warm light from the chandeliers. Her hazel eyes scan the room, not with idle curiosity, but with a quiet precision, as if she's cataloging every false smile and every forced laugh. When Evelyn, her mother-in-law, throws her head back in that perfectly rehearsed laugh, Madison's lips curl into a polite smile, but her fingers tap gently on the stem of her glass, a subtle tell for the storm she keeps locked inside. The band plays a slow jazz number in the background. The air smells faintly of salt drifting in from the Miami shoreline just beyond the balcony doors. A waiter passes behind her, and with a smooth, practiced motion, slides a folded napkin under her plate. Madison pauses. Her eyes drop to the edge of white paper peeking out from beneath the china. For a heartbeat, the music fades to a distant hum. Her face doesn't change, but the stillness around her does, every muscle tightens ever so slightly. The napkin is small, but its weight feels immense. She doesn't open it yet. Not here. Not now. But the audience knows, whatever is written on it will rip through this perfect party like a silent grenade. The clink of silverware and polite chatter swirled around Madison like static, but all she could hear was the faint crinkle of that folded napkin under her plate. She kept her hand still, her breathing even, her smile fixed, as if she were listening to Evelyn's toast about family loyalty and the blessings of unity. But under the table, her thumb slid along the edge of the paper, feeling the slight indentations of hastily scrawled ink. Every second she sat there was a battle between curiosity and control. She glanced across the table. Lucas was laughing with 2 colleagues, his champagne flute raised, but his eyes flickered toward her for just a fraction of a second, too quick, too cautious. She made her move. "Excuse me," she murmured, standing with her clutch in one hand and her glass in the other. The hallways outside the ballroom were quiet, lined with framed photographs of the hotel's grand openings and celebrity guests. Madison slipped into the nearest powder room, locked the door, and finally unfolded the napkin. 7 words stared back at her in jagged black ink. "Ask the night manager about suite 909. Beneath it, 2 weeks ago. Bring cash." Her chest tightened. 2 weeks ago, she had been lying in a hospital bed, pale and trembling, recovering from the emergency procedure that had ended their last hope of having a child. Lucas had told her he was in Dallas, finalizing a contract. She remembered his voice over the phone, warm, reassuring. Now it felt like acid in her ears. She leaned against the sink, forcing her pulse to slow. This could mean nothing. Or it could mean everything. She straightened her dress, wiped the corner of her eyes, and stepped out, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Instead of returning to the ballroom, Madison made her way to the concierge desk. "I believe your night manager is on duty," she asked, her voice steady, professional. The young receptionist blinked. "Yes, ma'am. He's in the office." 5 minutes later, she was sitting across from a man in his 50s, sleeves rolled up, eyes sharp with the kind of wariness that comes from knowing too many secrets. When she mentioned suite 909 and slid a slim envelope of cash across the desk, he exhaled slowly, as though he'd been expecting this moment. Without a word, he unlocked a drawer, retrieved a small black USB drive, and placed it in her palm. "Watch it alone," he said, voice low. "And, be ready." Madison slipped it into her clutch, thanked him, and walked toward the elevator, not back to the party, but to the rooftop parking garage where her car waited. The Miami night air was thick and warm, carrying the muffled music from the ballroom far below. She knew she couldn't wait until morning. Whatever was on this drive, she needed to see it now. The rooftop garage was quiet, save for the hum of a flickering light overhead. Madison slid into the driver's seat of her midnight blue sedan, locked the doors, and pulled the USB from her clutch. Her hands were steady, too steady for what she was about to see. She powered on her laptop, the glow lighting up her face in the dark. The folder on the drive had no name, just a date, 06/12. Her finger hovered over the trackpad for half a second before clicking it open. The first clip was grainy hotel security footage of the lobby. Madison's breath caught. Lucas was there, unmistakable in his tailored navy suit, his arm draped casually around a young brunette in a crimson dress. They looked like they belonged together. They looked happy. The second clip, the two of them at the hotel's rooftop restaurant, laughing over wine, her hand resting on his. Madison's stomach knotted. The timestamp at the bottom burned into her vision, 8:47 p.m., the exact time she remembered Lucas texting her "Goodnight, sweetheart. Try to rest," from what he claimed was his Dallas hotel. She clicked the third clip. The pair stepped into the elevator. Lucas glanced around, then pulled the woman close. They kissed, hungry, familiar, no hesitation. Madison flinched, as if the image itself had weight. The final clip was from the hallway. Lucas fumbled with the key card, then ushered the woman into suite 909, his hand low on her back, her laugh echoing down the empty corridor. The door closed. The video ended. For a moment, Madison sat frozen, the Miami night pressing against the windows. The ache in her chest was sharp, but it wasn't grief anymore, it was clarity. The kind that left no room for denial. She leaned back in the seat, eyes fixed on the city skyline in the distance. Lucas hadn't just lied. He had done it while she was bleeding alone in a hospital bed. He had traded her pain for pleasure without a second thought. Madison closed the laptop slowly, as if sealing away the last shred of the marriage she thought she had. In its place, something colder took root, a precision she'd only ever used in her work, now aimed at him. This wasn't going to be an outburst. It was going to be a dismantling. She started the engine, the low purr of the car almost blending with her voice as she whispered to herself. "You have no idea what you've started, Lucas." The tires rolled out of the garage and into the dark streets, but in Madison's mind, the path ahead was already lit, every step, every move, every strike. And she wouldn't miss. Madison didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen island, laptop open, coffee cooling untouched beside her, the USB drive lying like a loaded weapon on the marble countertop. The ocean breeze from the open balcony door carried the faint smell of salt and diesel from the nearby marina. She started digging. Emails, text backups, online banking. Lucas had been sloppy. Within 2 hours, Madison had traced over $30,000 funneled from a joint account into a personal checking account, then out again in cash withdrawals and luxury boutique purchases. A cross-check of receipts revealed restaurant bookings, spa treatments, and, most damning, 2 airfare tickets to New Orleans. Dates: 3 months ago, while he'd claimed to be at a corporate training retreat in Orlando. Every click, every file download felt less like grief and more like loading ammunition. At 5:12 a.m., she opened a new folder on her desktop, Project Collapse. Inside, she created subfolders: financial fraud, affairs, timeline, third parties. Each document labeled, dated, cross-referenced. It was a system she'd perfected in her career managing corporate crises, only now, she was the one engineering the disaster. By noon, Madison was dressed in a navy wrap dress, hair sleek, makeup flawless. She drove to a quiet law office on the edge of Coral Gables, where her former client, divorce and corporate fraud attorney Valerie Nash, greeted her with a single raised brow. "This isn't a social call, is it?" Valerie asked, closing the office door. "Not even close," Madison replied, sliding a leather folder across the desk. Inside, printed bank statements, photos from the USB, timelines, and a note in Madison's precise handwriting. Phase 1, exposure. Phase 2, asset freeze. Phase 3, removal. Valerie skimmed the documents, her lips tightening. You're not just divorcing him. You're going to hollow him out. That's the idea. Before leaving, Madison made one more stop, Evelyn's favorite country club. She didn't approach her mother-in-law. Instead, she had a quiet conversation with a longtime staff member who owed her a favor. Madison slipped an envelope into his hand, whispering, "If you hear anything about Lucas, meetings, calls, strange guests, I want to know before he does." By sunset, she was back in her condo, a glass of Merlot in hand. Her phone buzzed with a new text from an unknown number. "I know what Lucas did. Call me tonight. B." She stared at the screen, her mind racing. Only one B came to mind, Brian Caldwell, Lucas's older brother. They hadn't spoken more than a dozen words in years. If he was reaching out now, it meant the cracks in Lucas's world were already spreading. Madison took a slow sip of wine, eyes narrowing. The first trap was set. The second was about to spring. The call came just after 9 p.m. Madison sat on her balcony, the city lights of Miami flickering like restless fireflies across the bay. Her phone lit up with an unknown number. She let it ring twice before answering. "Madison Clark?" The voice was deep, steady, but carried an edge of unease. "Depends who's asking," she replied. "It's Brian. Lucas's brother. We need to talk. Tonight." They agreed to meet at a small Cuban cafe on Calle Ocho, the kind of place where the old men played dominoes in the back and no one cared enough to eavesdrop. Madison arrived first, choosing a table in the corner, her back to the wall. Brian walked in 10 minutes later. Taller than Lucas, broader shoulders, a face weathered by years in construction work. But it was his eyes that caught her, dark, conflicted, and heavy with something he'd carried far too long. He didn't waste time. "I'm not here to protect him. I'm here because you need to know what you're dealing with." Madison leaned forward, her fingers laced together. "Go on." Brian exhaled, the words coming slow at first. 3 years ago, Lucas came to me asking for 50 grand. Said it was for an investment, something that would double in 6 months. I told him no. Then, he hinted that if I didn't help, he'd tell Evelyn something that could ruin my marriage. He looked down at his coffee, swirling it in the cup. What he didn't know was, I already suspected what he was. Back when we were teenagers, he had incidents. One of them involved a cousin on our father's side. She never spoke to the family again. Madison felt the air between them tighten. "You're saying?" "I'm saying Lucas isn't just a cheater. He's a predator. And Evelyn's been covering for him since he was 17. The cafe's noise seemed to fade as Madison absorbed his words. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore, it was about a pattern. A sickness. A network of silence that let it grow. Brian reached into his jacket and slid a manila envelope across the table. "These are copies of texts, emails, and a few bank transfers I traced back to him. They'll help you. Use them however you need to." "But Madison." She looked up. "Once you go down this road, there's no coming back. You won't just be taking Lucas down. You'll be dismantling your entire in-law family." Madison's voice was steady, her hazel eyes locked on his. "Good." Brian gave a slow, grim nod. "Then I'm with you." They parted ways outside under the dim street lamps, the Miami night air thick and warm. Madison clutched the envelope, feeling its weight, not in paper, but in consequences. Phase 2 had just found its fuel. By the next morning, Madison was already moving. The manila envelope from Brian sat open on her desk, its contents spread out like pieces of a puzzle, bank transfers to shell companies, flirtatious emails sent from Lucas's work account, and a string of Venmo payments to an alias that matched the initials of the woman in the hotel footage. Madison worked in silence, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she cross-referenced names, dates, and transactions. A clear timeline began to form, a web of affairs, payoffs, and stolen funds. At 11:17 a.m., she sent a message from her encrypted email to Valerie Nash, her lawyer. Subject: Phase 2, Asset Freeze. I'll have everything you need by Friday. Coordinate with your contact at the bank. Quietly. Next, she called in a favor from her college friend Jessica, a cyberforensics consultant in Atlanta. Within hours, Jessica sent back a data dump, deleted messages recovered from Lucas's cloud backup. Some were mundane. Others. Madison had to pause and steady herself before reading on. They weren't just flirtations. They were arrangements. Booked hotels. Wire transfers. Promises of gifts in exchange for silence. By 6 p.m., Madison had compiled it all into a sleek, 34-slide presentation, dates, photos, dollar amounts, meticulously organized as if she were about to pitch a high-profile PR campaign. Only this time, the client was Justice. The next step, the public hit. She picked her moment carefully. Evelyn had planned a family unity dinner for Sunday night, inviting extended relatives, business associates, and Lucas's golf buddies. Madison knew this was her stage. But she wanted one more layer of insurance. That night, she returned to the hotel where the note had first been slipped to her. She found the same waitress, a young Cuban-American woman named Sophia, taking orders in the corner of the restaurant. Sophia froze when Madison approached, but relaxed when she heard the words, "I'm not here to get you in trouble. I just need you to tell me what you saw." Over a quiet table and 2 cafecitos, Sophia described it all, how Lucas had arrived with the brunette, how the staff whispered about him, how the night manager hinted this wasn't his first time. Madison recorded the conversation, with Sophia's permission, and left with an audio file that could corroborate everything. Back in her condo, she pinned a single sticky note above her desk, Sunday, 7:45 p.m. The clock was ticking, and Madison could feel it in her bones. Lucas thought he was walking into another night of shallow toasts and staged smiles. Instead, he was walking straight into the first detonation. And she'd be holding the remote. The dining room of Evelyn's bayfront estate glittered under crystal chandeliers, the Miami sunset bleeding gold and coral through floor-to-ceiling windows. Long tables were dressed in white linen, crystal stemware lined in perfect symmetry. The chatter of 40 guests, relatives, colleagues, golf club friends, bounced off the high ceilings. Madison arrived on time, wearing a deep emerald silk dress, her hair swept back into a low chignon. She carried no clutch, just a discreet black remote in her right hand, hidden under the folds of her skirt. Evelyn floated from guest to guest, dripping with pearls and smiles, her voice ringing clear, "Tonight is about unity. Family. The values we hold dear." Madison caught her eye from across the room and returned the smile, warm enough to mask the ice beneath it. Dinner began with a seared snapper course. Lucas sat 2 seats away from Madison, his hand resting lazily on the stem of his wine glass. He looked relaxed. Confident. Unaware that every forkful brought him closer to the edge. At 7:45 p.m., Evelyn rose to make her toast. Madison stood too, quietly stepping toward the archway that opened into the living room, where a 70-inch TV hung like a centerpiece above the mantel. As Evelyn raised her glass, Madison pressed the remote. The screen flickered to life. First, grainy hotel footage, Lucas in the lobby, arm in arm with the brunette. Gasps rippled through the room. Next, rooftop restaurant, their hands intertwined. A sharp clink as someone's fork hit a plate. Then, elevator. Kissing. Laughing. The timestamp in bold white numbers, June 12, 8:47 p.m., the same night Madison had been in the hospital. Lucas's chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Turn it off," he barked, but no one moved. The final clip rolled, the hallway outside Suite 909, the door closing behind them. Silence. Thick, suffocating. Madison stepped forward, her voice calm, carrying through the stunned room. 2 weeks ago, while I was recovering from surgery alone, Lucas was here. With her. Paid for with money he stole from this family. Evelyn's glass trembled in her hand. "Madison, this is inappropriate." "Inappropriate?" Madison tilted her head, eyes never leaving Lucas. I have the bank statements. The transfers. Even a staff witness who saw it all. Should I keep going? From the far end of the table, a voice cut through the air. You should, Brian said, his jaw set, eyes locked on Lucas. Because she's not the only one he's used. The room turned toward him. Evelyn's face drained of color. Brian stood, his hand sliding into his jacket pocket. I think it's time everyone hears exactly what kind of man we've been protecting. Lucas's knuckles whitened on the back of his chair. Madison didn't flinch. The first explosion had landed. The second was coming straight from someone Lucas never expected to stand against him. The clatter of silverware subsided into a heavy, electric silence. Brian stepped out from behind his chair, moving toward the center of the room. His height and the weight in his voice commanded the attention of every guest. I kept quiet for years, he began, his eyes fixed on Lucas, because I thought you were just reckless. Selfish. But the truth is much worse. Evelyn's hand shot up, palm trembling. Brian, that's enough. No, Mom, he said sharply, his tone slicing through the room. You've covered for him long enough. He pulled a folded stack of papers from his jacket and placed them on the table in front of Madison. She didn't touch them, just let them sit there like evidence in a courtroom. These, Brian continued, are emails, payment receipts, and a police incident report from 2005. The victim was a 17-year-old girl from our father's side of the family. She never pressed charges because Evelyn convinced her mother it would ruin our name. Lucas gave them $5,000 to disappear. Gasps broke out along the table. One of Lucas's golf buddies muttered a curse under his breath. Lucas's voice rose, brittle and defensive. That's a lie. You can't prove. Brian cut him off, his voice like stone. I can. And I will. Because I also have witness statements from 2 other women, one from college, one from 3 years ago, who tell the exact same story. The pattern is the same, Lucas. The threats. The payouts. The silence. Evelyn's face was ashen now, her pearl necklace trembling against her collarbone. You think this helps you, Brian? You'll destroy all of us. Brian turned to her, his expression flat. No, Mom. Lucas destroyed us a long time ago. You just helped bury the evidence. Madison finally slid the stack of papers toward her, glancing at the top page, an official incident report, complete with dates, a name, and Lucas's signature. Her stomach knotted, but her resolve hardened. This wasn't just about infidelity or theft. It was about predation, and a lifetime of enabling. Around the table, guests shifted uncomfortably. Some avoided Lucas's eyes. Others stared at him openly, the disgust unmasked. Lucas looked at Madison, his expression a cocktail of rage and desperation. You think this will break me? You're wrong. She met his gaze, unblinking. No, Lucas. This isn't to break you. It's to end you. The room felt like it was holding its breath, every eye trained on the fault line splitting the Caldwell family in two. And Madison knew, this was only the second blast. The aftershocks were still coming, and the next one would hit harder. The night after the dinner, Madison's condo was lit only by the glow of her laptop. On the coffee table lay the stack of papers Brian had handed her, now joined by fresh printouts, the hotel footage, Sophia's recorded testimony, and a meticulously organized spreadsheet of every financial transfer Lucas had made in the last 3 years. Brian sat across from her, his arms folded, watching as she clicked through files. If we're doing this, we have to go big. Not just family big, public big. Madison nodded. It has to leave our control the second it's out. That's the only way they can't bury it. At 10:42 p.m., she opened a secure messaging app and contacted Daniel Reyes, an investigative journalist in New York whose exposés on corporate abuse had made national headlines. The message was simple. I have evidence of serial misconduct, financial fraud, and a cover-up spanning nearly 2 decades. Multiple victims, multiple witnesses. Are you interested? The reply came in under 2 minutes. Yes. Call me. Now. The next morning, Madison and Brian sat in a quiet corner of a Brickell coffee shop, sliding a slim black USB across the table to Daniel. He plugged it into his laptop, his eyes narrowing as clip after clip, document after document, unfolded before him. When he finally looked up, his tone had changed, measured, careful. This isn't just a story. This is a case. And if we do it right, it could bring every single one of his protectors down with him. By Friday afternoon, Daniel's legal team had vetted the material. 2 victims agreed to go on record. A third sent an anonymous statement corroborating the timeline. Sophia signed a sworn affidavit. Madison didn't have to imagine the impact, she could already feel it building. On Sunday morning, the headline went live across 3 major news sites. Miami businessman linked to multiple assault allegations and financial misconduct, family cover-up exposed. By noon, Lucas's name was trending on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. A dozen women, some anonymous, others using their real names, began posting their own stories in the comments. The hashtag justice for her started spreading beyond Florida. Evelyn called Madison twice. Madison didn't answer. On the 3rd attempt, she sent a text instead. Tell Lucas the silence is over. And I'm just getting started. That evening, Brian forwarded her a voicemail from one of Lucas's business partners. They're pulling out. Investors are walking. The board wants him suspended immediately. Madison leaned back in her chair, a slow, steady satisfaction settling over her. This was the beginning of the free fall. And Lucas was going to hit every jagged rock on the way down. By Wednesday morning, Madison knew Lucas was feeling the walls close in. Her first clue came in the form of a hand-delivered envelope, left at her condo door without a return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Meet me at the marina tonight. Alone. Or you'll regret it. No signature, but the handwriting was his, sharp, slanted, impatient. Madison didn't go. Instead, she forwarded a photo of the note to Daniel Reyes and her lawyer, Valerie. Valerie's reply was immediate, he's rattled. That's good. But we're documenting this as harassment. By afternoon, the pressure was mounting on all sides. 2 more victims had agreed to speak publicly. Brian had turned over the 2005 police report to the DA's office. And now, Lucas was moving like a man who could feel his life's foundation splitting beneath him. At 9:13 p.m., her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. Seconds later, her inbox pinged, a voice message attachment. Madison plugged in her earbuds, pressed play. Lucas's voice filled her ears, low and venomous. You think you're smart? You think you can ruin me? I know things about you, Madison. Things that will make them turn on you in a second. Call this off, or I will bury you. She listened twice, not for the words, but for what was underneath them, panic. The cracks in his composure were widening. The next morning, Daniel called. Our legal team wants that audio. Combined with the note, it shows intent to intimidate a witness. That's a felony in Florida. Madison met him at his office, handing over both. Do what you need to do, she said. Just make sure it sticks. By Friday, the DA had quietly expanded the investigation to include obstruction of justice. The moment Lucas learned of it, through a leak from someone inside his own legal team, he lost whatever caution he had left. That night, as Madison walked to her car after a late meeting, a shadow stepped out from behind a column in the parking garage. Lucas. His suit was wrinkled, tie loose, eyes bloodshot. You think you've won? He hissed, closing the distance. This isn't over. I will take you down with me. Madison didn't flinch. She pulled her phone from her coat pocket, already recording. Go ahead, Lucas. Say it again. For a heartbeat, he stared at her, jaw working, then turned sharply and walked away, only to find two uniformed officers blocking the exit. The taller one stepped forward. "Lucas Caldwell? You're under arrest for witness intimidation and harassment." As they cuffed him, Madison kept her phone steady, recording every second. Not for herself, she didn't need the satisfaction, but for the women who had waited years to see this man cornered. Lucas didn't look back as they led him away. And Madison knew, the next time he walked free, it would be into a courtroom, not into her life. The courthouse in downtown Miami buzzed like a hive. Reporters clustered on the steps, cameras snapping as every key player arrived. Madison stepped out of a black sedan, flanked by Valerie on one side and Brian on the other. She wore a navy sheath dress, simple, sharp, impossible to rattle. Inside, the courtroom was cool and hushed, the air thick with the weight of years of silence about to be broken. Lucas sat at the defense table in a tailored suit that couldn't hide the hollowness in his eyes. Evelyn was behind him, face pale, lips pressed into a thin line. The prosecution began by calling witnesses, each one another brick in the wall closing in on him. Sophia testified first, her voice trembling at the start, but growing steadier as she described seeing Lucas with the brunette in Suite 909, the laughter, the intimacy, the indifference. Two women from his past followed, telling eerily similar stories, threats, hush money, and the suffocating shame that kept them silent for years. The jury listened, eyes narrowed, pen scratching. When Brian took the stand, the atmosphere shifted. His voice was low but firm as he recounted the 2005 incident, the family cover-up, and the $5,000 payoff Evelyn had orchestrated. He didn't look at his mother once. Finally, it was Madison's turn. She walked to the witness stand with measured steps, placing a thick folder on the railing. Valerie gave a small nod from the table. Under oath, Madison laid it all out, the hospital stay, the napkin, the USB, the bank statements, the recorded threats. She spoke not with rage, but with precision, her words slicing cleaner than any outburst could. Then came the final blow. She clicked a small remote, and the courtroom monitor lit up with a video clip, grainy, time-stamped. Lucas, on a late-night livestream years ago, laughing as he bragged about getting away with things because people are too scared to talk. Gasps echoed through the room. Lucas shifted in his chair, his jaw clenching. Madison looked directly at the jury. "This man has been allowed to harm people for years because the truth was buried. I'm here so that it never gets buried again, not for me, not for anyone." When she stepped down, she didn't glance at Lucas. Instead, she walked past the gallery where Sophia, the other women, and Brian sat. Each one met her eyes, and in that moment, Madison felt the years of isolation lifting. The judge called for recess, but the mood in the room was already settled. The jury didn't need much more. Lucas's defense had crumbled, not from one fatal blow, but from the relentless accumulation of truth. As Madison left the stand, Valerie leaned in. "We just locked this case." Madison exhaled slowly, her gaze fixed ahead. The verdict was coming, and she already knew which way the scales would tip. The courtroom was silent as the jury filed back in. 12 faces, unreadable, carrying the weight of weeks of testimony. Madison sat with her hands clasped in her lap, feeling Brian's steady presence beside her. Across the aisle, Lucas kept his eyes on the table, his jaw tight. The foreperson stood. On the charges of aggravated assault, financial fraud, and witness intimidation, we find the defendant guilty on all counts. A collective exhale swept through the room. Lucas's head dropped forward, and for the first time, he didn't fight. The judge's voice was firm, without hesitation. "The defendant is hereby sentenced to 40 years in state prison. No parole. No reduction. Court adjourned." The gavel struck. Cameras clicked. Evelyn slumped back in her seat, one trembling hand over her mouth. Madison didn't look at her, there was nothing left to say. Outside, the Miami air was warm and bright. Reporters swarmed, microphones thrust forward, but Madison raised a hand. "No statements today." She had spoken enough inside those walls, the rest of her voice belonged to herself now. Later that evening, she returned to her condo and walked straight to the small wooden box on her bookshelf. Inside, neatly folded, was the napkin from that night at the retirement party. She carried it out to the balcony, the city skyline glittering like 1,000 tiny verdicts. With a flick of her lighter, the napkin curled and blackened, the ink vanishing into smoke. She watched until the last ember died, feeling the final tether to that chapter burn away. A week later, Madison stood before a room of women at a community center, survivors, daughters, mothers. She shared her story, not to relive the pain, but to hand them the tools she had learned to wield: documentation, legal protection, courage to speak before it's too late. Her closing words lingered in the room long after she left. Silence doesn't protect you. It only protects the one hurting you. The moment you speak, you take your power back, and sometimes, you give someone else the courage to do the same. As she stepped outside, the sun was setting over Miami Bay, casting the water in gold. Madison felt lighter, not because the fight was over, but because she knew she had turned her pain into something unbreakable. Lucas was gone. His silence was broken. And Madison Clark was no longer just a survivor, she was a force.
If this story resonated with you, leave a comment. Tell us, have you ever had to heal without an apology? And what gave you the strength to keep going anyway? Speech balloon, you never know. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Like, subscribe, and share if you believe in turning pain into power. And remember, your story isn't over. It's just beginning.